Thanks for choosing Effects, and I'm going to show you right now how to set up an account on Effects, and then later on we'll show you how to build your own workflows and everything else you need in order to use Effects effectively. So first of all, we're going to go to, on our menu, we're going to go to Effects, and then we're going to choose Register for Effects. Okay, so imagine that we are a nonprofit. So we select the nonprofit option. And then we decide that we are good with the standard plan, which gives us up to 50 running workflows, but unlimited users and unlimited templates for 60 bucks a month. So we're going to select that. Now we're going to create our account. So I'm going to say that I am Charitable Giving Associates. Okay, so as you can see, it says that we have here our Effects for Nonprofit standard plan. I'm going to put in our administrative ID. I'm just going to call this admin. You can call it whatever you want. And then we're going to set up a password. As you're used to doing, I'm sure, we're going to put the password in twice. It has to be from 6 to 12 characters with at least one digit, one capital letter, and one special character. So I am going to put in a password that matches those rules. Then I'm going to retype that password. Okay, we're going to put in some contact information. So I'm going to put in a name, Melissa Owens. I'm sure there are Melissa Owenses out there, but this is not any specific Melissa Owens. I'm going to put in the name of the organization. Again, this could be a different name if the contact person is not necessarily an employee of that organization. We'll just put in fake address, 10 Main Street in Birmingham and Alabama, and I'm going to take a wild guess on what Alabama's zip codes are, and also perhaps their area codes. Put in the primary phone and then some sort of a secondary phone if you have it. And then this is very important that you give us the email address because that you will want us to contact you with, because this is where we will be sending information pertinent to your account. So I'm going to use my own address, which is info@exasa.com. Okay, so let's just take a quick check over this, and I think everything looks good. So let's do create, and then looks good. So now I have to put in a payment. Now I'm going to put in a coupon ID that I generated for myself. You may indeed have a coupon ID like this if you have requested it from Exasa. Those are really only provided for those who are doing beta testing for us. We also have options to pay by credit card or by PayPal. So I'm just going to click save on this coupon ID, and boom, I am registered. So this account number, which is now the account number for my new account, is something that I will need in the future. So I do need to make a note of it. It has been emailed to the email address that I provided. So you will always have a copy of this, but it's always good to make a note of it, because you will need this, as you will see just in a minute, every time you log in. So I'm going to make a note of this right now so that I can type it in, and it does need to be typed in exactly as it is shown. Okay, so TJJ, RFZ, PJ, CR, and then RLRI. Okay, so right now I've got click here to log into your account. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And normally speaking, this is how you will get to your account after you've created it. So I'm going to put in the account ID. So TJJ hyphen, sure you type it in exactly as is, as you saw it, all caps. They all should be all caps, RLRI. So TJJ, RFC, PJ, CR, RLRI. Okay, now the user ID that I used, if you recall, was admin. And now I'm going to type in the password that I selected and click login. And boom, that is my home page for my account. It lets me manage these various aspects of my account. And this is me up here, Charitable Giving Donations Associates, Giving Associates, and I can change my password or log out over here. So the very first thing that you want to do as you are using effects is to, if you're not using one of our canned workflows that we will provide with the account, will be to create your own templates. So before you start templating, you will need to create some roles. So we're going to do that first. So since we are a charitable giving organization, we're going to create a couple of roles. We are going to create an administrative role. Okay. This is for people doing the books and just keeping the trains on time, and then we will create another role that we are going to call fundraising, because obviously if you're giving out money, you're going to be doing some fundraising in order to get the money you're going to give out. And then let's just leave it at those two. Okay, so we have two roles here, administrative and fundraising. All right, so let's go now. The next thing is we're going to add some people to this, people who have these roles. So these people are called assignees because they can be assigned tasks in these workflows. So we already have admin in here. So we are going to assign admin a role, and we're going to click this edit button over here. And let's assign it the role of administrative, which makes sense. So let's give it a name of, let's just say that this is Melissa Owens, the person we put in before. And now we have Melissa Owens up here. She logs in with admin, and we now will see, if we refresh, we will see that she has the administrative role. Okay. Let's add one more assignee and give them a unique assignee name. It might be helpful to actually use an email address for this. So let's give this the email address of Exasa so that we can see that. Actually, no, let's go ahead and just give it one for, let's call it cga.org. So let's call it fundraising at cga.org. Okay, and we'll call this Janine Powell. Okay. I'm going to give this one the same password I gave the other one just for simplicities, and she will have the role of fundraising. Okay, click save. So now we have two assignees here, a fundraising at cga.org, and then admin. One's Melissa Owens, one's Janine Powell. One has the role of administrative, and one has the role of fundraising. Okay, so now that we have our assignees and our roles, now we can create a template. So we can go up here to manage templates, and let's create a new one. So one of the things that we might do in this Charitable Giving Associates organization is we might process a funding application. Let's call it a grant application. So if we want to edit this, we just click here on the edit button, and that brings us to a screen that allows us to actually visually create this workflow template. So over here to the left, we have what we call our bench. And so that's a series of tasks and branch points and merge points that are on the bench, just like they would be in a ball game. They aren't integrated with each other. So what we can do, though, if we want to bring them together, is to drag and drop them over here onto the diagram grid. So this gear represents the workflow in itself and is the starting point for the workflow. So in order to create a task, or which is here, or a branch that lets you run multiple tasks at the same time, or a merge, which lets you bring those branches back together again, we just click on one of these icons here. So we're going to click on this hammer, and that's going to create a new task. Okay, so it comes out initially with just the name of new task, but we can click on this little document here and edit that. And let's say that the first task that we're going to do when we process a grant application is going to be send out application. Now right below here, let's skip location for a second and let's go to role. So on role, we have the two roles that we created earlier, administrative and fundraising. So let's say that this is an administrative task. Now right below here, we have two ways that we can assign that task. One is called conscripted and one is called voluntary. So we're going to do conscripted first. And what that means is that one single person who has the role of administrative is going to be assigned this task. The reason why it's only one is because down here we have a minimum of one and a maximum of one. Now, if we change this to be a minimum of one and a maximum of two, then we would assign that to multiple people, up to two. And if both of them were to finish that task, then we would have two completions of that task. But at least one of them needs to be completed in order for the workflow to continue. So for right now, we're going to keep this simple, and we're just going to make it a min and a max of one. So that means one and exactly one person who has the role of administrative is going to be assigned this task. Up here, we have something called location. Now, if we want to, and you have what's called a URL, that's the thing that you type in at the top of your browser. If you have a URL that will take them to a place that will allow them to complete the task, you could put that in here. So imagine you just had some piece of software that you had subscribed to, similar to Effects, that was called grantapp.com. You could take them to grantapp.com, and they would, the person who is completing this task would then be able to fill out the grant application. Okay. So we're going to take a look over this to make sure everything looks good, and then we're going to click OK. So now this task has been changed to be the name of send out application. So we're going to make this the first task, and we're going to do that by dragging this over to the diagram. We're just going to put it right beside the gear that represents the workflow. And then we're going to, if you can see this little arrow here, we are going to click on that and then drag that. You can see you've got it because you have that little dotted rectangle right below the arrow that indicates you're dragging something, and then drop it on top of one of the arrows associated with the first task. You can actually drop it on any of the arrows, but we're just going to drop it on this first one. And when you do that, okay, so if you notice, it created a line there, a directed line going from process a grant application to the first task, which is send out application. So that's the way that we indicate that one step follows another. So let's say that the next two tasks are going to be done at the same time. So if we want to do that, in effect, we create what's called a branch point. Okay, so a branch point really just provides that parallelism that we talked about. So you could give it any name that you would want to give it. Let's imagine that these two tasks that are going to be done together would be to validate request and to vet request. So vet and validate. So imagine those are two separate things. Okay, so we're just going to call the branching vet and validate. All right, so let's draw this over here, drag it over here, drop it, and then we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to click on this arrow and then click on that and drop it on that arrow, and that means now that vet and validate, this branch point, is the next task after send out application is done. Okay, so let's create the vet and the validate tasks. We'll create two different tasks here. First one we'll call vet request maybe, and we'll leave this empty for now. We will have administrative do all of these, and let's make this voluntary just to make it interesting. So what happens with a voluntary, which you'll see in a second, is that instead of the task automatically being assigned to the people in the role, they are sent invitations to volunteer for that task. So we will send it, since there's only one person in it, we will just leave 1 and 1 as the min and max. And then let's click OK. We've got vet request. So to keep our diagram attractive and visually informative, let's move this up here. And then we will associate the branch point to that request, that vet request task. Okay, so let's, we decided that was going to be validate. So now let's make this validate request. Okay. Let's just leave this conscripted and click OK, and move that down here, and let's associate that with that one. And so now we're starting to get a sense of a flow here. Okay, you start out with the grant application. That's the workflow itself. The first step is sending out the application. When that's completed, we branch off. We do this vet and validate branching. So we vet the request, and at the same time, we validate the request. Okay, now let's bring those branches back together again with what's called a merge point. And we'll just call that reconcile. You can call whatever is meaningful to you. You don't even necessarily need to give it a name. It's just something bringing these two branches back together again. So as you see, we are continuing to do this drawing and associating these as predecessors and successors in the workflow. And then let's just do a final wrap-up task just to make this kind of neat. And then we can call this fulfill grant. And we will leave this as is and make Okay, and then we'll drag this over here. And then we will make that to be the final task in the workflow. So in order to save this, we need to click Save Changes up here. Our save changes are saved. And now we have a workflow a template that we can kick off an infinite number of times and just do this exact workflow every time we get a grant application. So we'll take a look at that in just a second. So now we're going to show you how to actually run a workflow from your template. So here's the template that we created, process a grant application. So we're going to click on this plus button here. And when I click on that, it prompts me to enter the name of the workflow. So this would be something like the specific grant that you are processing. So the Davidson grant, let's call it. Okay, so click Save. And then if we come over here to look at Manage Workflows, we will see that now we have under here the Davidson grant, which is the one that we just created. There is one task running, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. And here's the reference ID that was created for that particular instance of the workflow. So this represents one instance of this workflow that's running, created from that template. As you can see, we've had others in the past that have been created from that same workflow template. Okay, so now let's take a look at my workload. Okay, so my workload is for this admin person who we created earlier on. And this person actually is an assignee, as we noticed, because they belong to a role that we created. So now we have this in this new workflow, a task called Send Out Application, whose status is assigned. So if you recall in the Send Out Application, we had conscripted assignment. So instead of sending us an advertisement asking us, would we like to work on this task, it automatically assigns it. So we have been assigned this and it's in our inbox for the day. Okay. So if I want to start this workflow, all I need to do is click on this little person running and the task has now been started. Okay. If I refresh the page, you'll see that in fact the status has changed. Okay, so now if I want to work on this, I would just click on this particular hammer right here, and that would open up whatever we've input in that location field. Now, I don't think we put anything in there, so we won't see anything at this point. But if you have put a URL into that location field for that task, and you click on this hammer, when you click on it, a new tab on your browser will come up, and whatever you put in there will show, and then you can work on the task. What we're going to do is we're just going to say, okay, we're done with this task. So we click the check mark right here. And this task is now completed. And if we click refresh on this, we see that that task is gone because completed tasks don't show up in your workload. But we have two new tasks here. If you remember when we looked at the workflow, in fact, let's take a look at that again. Let's take a look at the manage grant application, process grant application. You'll see we did the send out application. But now we're branching, and we're branching to two different tasks at the same time, vet request and validate request. Okay, so that's why we have two tasks in our inbox. So if we come back over here, it's the same workflow, the Davidson grant, and we have two tasks, validate request and vet request. Okay, this one's already been assigned, and this one's been advertised. Okay, so let's just go ahead and volunteer for that. We click the little briefcase here, and when we click on that, that task has been accepted. If we had clicked on the X, we would have declined that task and it would come out of our workload. Okay. So if we refresh it, now we have two that are assigned, the vet and the validate, because we accepted that task when it was advertised to us. So now we can start both of these tasks. So I'll click on this, task started, and click on this, task started. And then if we refresh, we see that they're both started. Okay, so that's really the way that this whole process works. Various people who log in using their own IDs will see my workload. If they are also admin, have admin privileges, they will see these other menu options. But for most people who are just assignees, all they'll see is my workload. And they will be able to work on their tasks that are in their inbox, doing exactly the steps that we just did. Okay, so hopefully this has shown you the power and the simplicity of effects, and hopefully you will take a look at it and start to use it and to incorporate it into your daily work life. Visit us at www.exasa.com at any time in order to learn more about effects and to actually sign up for effects and become one of our customers. We look forward to serving you. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.